Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
Strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey with Jason
and Amanda.
We've got a special guest with us here today. We have a Miss Katie Nall, maybe even Dr. Katie Nall. How about that? Katie left home in high school. She was homeless for a while. She was placed in foster home until she graduated from high school and then hitchhiked 20 miles to college. And now she's helping others dissolve their waffles. Dissolving waffles at a first glance is not what it sounds like. There's no milk involved here. Waffles is worries, anxiety, fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress. And apparently I have some mouth lethargy going on because English is leaving me. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, both Jason and Amanda. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Oh, it's great to have you. You know, Amanda and I were watching your TED Talk, and then, of course, YouTube doesn't spy on you or know everything you're thinking about, but it just keeps auto-playing things that have you in it that they can find. And so we watched and saw a lot of the story, especially of where you're at today. You know, we watch you talking about dissolving waffles and the EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, right?
I'm so impressed. Good work.
I'm impressed too, because I've been trying to remember that for like a day and a half, and it should be electromagnetic frequency in my head or something. I couldn't remember it. So I'm just proud I remembered it.
I am too.
Bonus points for you.
Yeah. So we're talking, we were listening to all that and really wild and interesting stuff. We listened to a lot of the stuff you talk about with the tapping, which honestly I have never heard before. And when you said it's been in use since 30 years ago, and I'm like 40. Okay. 40 years, yeah. I've been around that long and then a little bit, and I've never heard of it before until just recently. We had Gina Human on one of the episodes, and Gina tells her story as she dealt with a kid who came from Bulgaria, somewhere that started with a B, another country, and it was a kid who was
diagnosed with RAD.
Yeah, diagnosed with RAD. He had a really rough backstory and had reactive attachment disorder, and her husband went through the ringer trying to help this kid, and eventually found the right therapies and on a really good pathway. It's one of the few really, really positive RAD stories I've heard. But she left the whole situation with some pretty serious PTSD from it all.
But that was one thing that the therapist had taught her was tapping, and she had wild success with her child with that.
And she said that was one of the things that gave her, one of the only things that gave her big success. So that was one of the things that I was like, oh, hang on, I hear some correlation to some things I've heard in the past. And I see you're doing all this stuff and helping all these people. But that's an amazing story for anybody. But go back to that backstory. You left home in high school. You were homeless. You're in foster care. And when you ended up in college, you hitchhiked to get there. I mean,
that's perseverance.
Yeah, it is. So what made you leave home back at the beginning?
So, Jason and Amanda, it's funny going back, and now that I'm getting older and trying to still make sense of all of that, right? It's been an interesting journey. My parents divorced before I was born. And what's interesting is that my mother, this was in the 1950s, said she wanted to borrow their one car that they had. My father was stationed in San Francisco at the time. She wanted to borrow the one car to go out and get, I think, cigarettes or something. And she took the one car they had and drove from San Francisco to Pittsburgh, Kansas. Now, think about this. This was a single woman in the 1950s. She did not have a credit card. I'm sure she had no cash. And how did she get from San Francisco to Pittsburgh, Kansas? Now, why would she leave? Well, my father was, I've been told, excited when he found out that his new wife was pregnant, until he had called his mother to say, guess what? We're going to have a child. My father was an only child, and his mother had decided that she wasn't keen about being a mother. So when my father was 5 years old, she placed him in a boarding school. Imagine a 5-year-old in a boarding school. He was in the Navy at the time when when he met my mother, and they married. And so when he told his mother that she was going to be a grandma, her response was, "I'm too young to be a grandmother. You've got to abort the baby." My mother, who was raised as a strict Roman Catholic, didn't like the sound of that, and borrowed the car, drove from San Francisco to Southeast Kansas, where she gave birth to me while she was living with her parents, who were in their 60s at the time. And she got a full-time job. And actually, it's really interesting. I was pretty much raised by my grandparents, right? Because my mother was working, and my nearby aunt, who lived in Arma, Kansas. We're talking about all these small towns in Southeast Kansas. And they really gave me the difference, I believe, that made the difference in my life. Because as I've done my research, as I've done the studies, it's the first 12 months of life that can really make a difference. After I was born, my mother met and married her second husband, had 2 more children. When I was about 10 years old, they got a divorce. She met and married a third husband, they got a divorce, and she met and married a fourth husband. Throughout all of this, we basically were pretty much living in poverty. From time to time, when the new husband would come in and they'd have a new job, there would be lots of money for a while, but then it would go back. I ended up attending 12 different schools in 5 different states as I was growing up. We never moved in the summer. We always moved, sometime mid-state. The one thing that was constant in my education was math, because that's pretty consistent, right? All the way through. There's something interesting that happened between World War I and World War II. But when I left one school, they were starting the study of World War I. And when I transferred to the other school, they would finish the World War II studies. So whenever I have questions about that, I just ask my husband, because it's just too much to read.
That's a lot of instability for a kid, though.
Well, not only, Amanda, was it instability, but I had 2 siblings that, you mentioned that you grew up fast.
Yes.
I grew up fast too. I remember taking my first real job with a paycheck. I was so proud of myself. I had been taking jobs along the way, babysitting jobs. I'm really going to date myself, collecting pop bottles and taking them to the store for 5 cents a piece in my little wagon. And I would crochet, little pot holders. I would do anything to generate income so that there would be things that we could buy. I used to write plays and force my siblings to be in the plays. I would sell tickets to the neighborhood kids for a nickel. I would hand out popcorn for free, extra salted, so that I could sell the Kool-Aid at 15 cents. But even then, when you're growing up in that kind of environment, that's all you know, right? Absolutely. And so you think that this is what everybody's going through. As we moved from place to place, and I was getting older, I started kind of looking around to see, hey, not everybody else is moving around like we're moving around. And hey, they've got a really nice house. And wow, look at her clothes. And gosh, they're doing different things. And as I got older, I started trying to determine what was the difference. And for me, the difference that I saw was that the people that were going places and doing things that I wanted to do, their parents had more education. We were pretty much a group that was led by a single mother back when there were not a lot of single mothers. It's not like it is now, right? It was pretty unusual and we were attending parochial schools. So the nuns were telling us all the time about how my mother was excommunicated from the church, and, we were going on through all that. When I figured out that education was going to make the difference because my mother really didn't. I think she had 1 year of college and she was studying art. She was very artistic. Um, and so her jobs were all low level jobs. And of course, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, women's pay was even worse than it is now. So we never had enough money. My first job that I took, where I did get a paycheck and they took out Social Security and all that stuff, I was 12 years old and I worked at the restaurant that was directly behind our house as a dishwasher for a huge amount of money of 75 cents an hour. And I was thrilled to get it, right? Because what I did with the money is I was able to buy winter coats for me and my siblings. And so this kind of continued on, and it's just what we thought. From time to time, we'd go back and stay with grandparents. We were able to stay close to cousins, which made a huge difference. And they were probably the people I got to observe the most because I could see their lifestyle. One of my cousins had a horse. Another group of cousins belonged to country club. Other cousins would ask me, "Have you ever had a bicycle?" And I'm like, "Well, someday." So watching my cousins is probably where I got the big idea that their education is what got them. So education really became the drive for me. When I was a junior in high school, I think it was between my sophomore and junior year, a couple of years before that, all of a sudden I had the opportunity to meet my father for the first time. Well, as you might imagine, my entire life, my father was on this pedestal. He was going to save me from all of this disruption, from all this chaos, from all this craziness. And so the idea of meeting him was just like my heart was going to burst.
Hey there, Foster Care Nation. We'd like to take a quick minute to step out of the podcast here and ask you guys for a little bit of support. If you could share an episode with people, friends, in a group, with family, anywhere where there's somebody who would like to hear this. Also, if you'd like to join us and support our mission, a couple dollars a month would be really helpful. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/fostercarenation. Now back to the show.
So I was 14 years old when I first met him, and I just thought he was amazing. He flew in from California where he was living, and we were in Missouri. We were in Missouri at the time, Stewartsville, Missouri. And he met us. We actually drove to Kansas City and met him at the airport there. I just realized something. That's the same place I met. I didn't really put that together before. That's the same place I first met one of the children that my mother gave up for adoption. It was at the Kansas City airport. Just put that together. Anyway, so I met him there. And then between my sophomore and junior year, I was supposed to fly out to California to spend the summer with them. And I couldn't. I was so disappointed when my father called and said, "I'm really sorry you can't come out because I'm getting a divorce from my second wife. And she will be in jail because she hired a hitman to kill me." So I couldn't go. I couldn't go there. So I'm kind of feeling like my options are closing in on me, right? But we had been at the same place for more than a year, and I was starting to make friends. It was a small enough town. We were in Nebraska then, and it was a small enough town that people were starting to notice me, and I was starting to, make friends. And I actually got nominated to one of the homecoming courts. Well, it wasn't the big one, it was the basketball homecoming, but still, to be recognized.
Big deal for you though.
Yeah, it felt really good. So I was very excited. So I told my mom about it, and I asked what my curfew was because I never went out. I really didn't date, I just didn't do any of that stuff. And I asked her what my curfew was, and she said, "We have to be home by 9:00. I'm a junior in high school, and this is the big dance, which really doesn't start until after the game, which is like 8:30 or 9:00. And I was like, 9:00. So by that time I'd kind of gotten my, I was a teenager, and luckily I knew everything. So
Well, of course you did, because you were a teen. You had to know it all.
yeah, I knew everything. So I decided I was going to show my mother. So I had my date. We went to the dance. It was pretty tame. Nothing's going on. And my date drove up to drop me off at 11 o'clock. And I looked at my watch and I said, nope, I'm not going in right now. Do you mind sitting in the car with me for another hour? Because I'm not going to go inside until midnight. And he said, sure. So we sat out in the car until midnight. And I said, okay, I'll go in now. So at the time we were living in a section of town that I called, and others did too, Welfare Island, because it was a less expensive place to live. And they were quite nice. They were very nice places. It was a 2-story kind of place. And that Saturday, that next day, was my SAT. And education is important to me, right? And I knew that I had to do well on my SAT so that I could go to college. I had no idea which college I was going to go to. I had no idea what I was going to study. I just knew that I needed to get education. So I went, and of course I didn't have a key because I was a junior in high school and couldn't be trusted. And so I checked the front door, that was locked. I checked the back door, and that was locked. So I opened the utility room door, which was adjacent but separate, and the washer and dryer was there. So I slept on the washer and dryer until daylight. And at daylight, I knew I had to get up and get dressed and go to take my SATs. So I checked the doors. The doors were still locked. So I started throwing rocks at the windows to wake up my sister. And finally, I heard steps coming down. I was like, oh my God, it'd be great. And sure enough, the door opened, and it was my mother. I was coming in at 6 a.m. when I was supposed to be coming in at 9. It did not go well.
I can imagine.
It did not go well. There was lots of loud words, lots of physical stuff going on. And it was at that point that I just said, I really think this is enough. She would not drive me the few miles to the nearby town where the SAT was going to be on. The SAT was important to me, so I walked. I walked those few miles to get to the SAT so I could take my SAT, so I could go to some college somewhere and study something so I can have a different life. That was my goal. Pretty specific, don't you think?
It's at least a goal.
For a high school kid. Yeah, for a high school kid, that is actually kind of specific for most high school kids I know.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jason. So I took my SAT, walked back home, and when I got home, my sister was there, and she'd heard the whole thing, but my mother was not there. So I grabbed a couple outfits. I didn't grab a suitcase or anything, and I just left. I was like, I'm done. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. We were again in a new town. There was no support system. There was nobody there. And so I literally slept under the bushes in Nebraska for a while because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I still went to high school. Some of my friends figured out that what was going on, and they would let me sleep in their place a day or two until their parents found out, and their parents would flip out and throw me out. And so I just kind of moved around from place to place. And finally, I realized I really needed some stability, right? And went to my high school counselor. I said, I don't know. Can you help me find a place to live? And they're like, foster homes. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what that is, but let's do it. And so they placed me in a foster home. Later, I found out that my foster sister was in the same grade as my sister I grew up with. And I guess she really lorded it over my younger sister, which I didn't know at all. So I stayed there for a little over a year, graduated from high school on a Friday night. Nobody came. Had made arrangements with my dad that he said he would pay for me to go to college if I flew out to San Diego. It's like, not another word, I'm there. He paid for my ticket, right? I flew out there. He picked me up at the San Diego airport and quickly drove me out of San Diego, which I was kind of like, I've been writing you letters and I know the address was in San Diego. So why are we going out of San Diego? And we ended up in the home of his ex-wife, who was now recently out of jail after a 1-year trial, and it ended up in a hung jury. And so I walked right into there, met my his son and daughter from her, and they didn't know I existed until I walked in the door. So that was kind of fun to explain all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, "You'll be living here." And at first I was like, I thought I was going to be living with my dad. Looking back at it, a 42-year-old man with an 18-year-old girl in a studio apartment in San Diego, not a good idea. But at the time I was a little hurt. And I said, "Okay, this is great. I'm excited. Where's the school? This is a really small town." I'm looking around. I don't see the college anywhere. I don't know much about college, but I know it's got to have a building here.
Right?
The college is 20 miles away. I said, "Okay, well, Southern California doesn't have a lot of sidewalks, doesn't have a lot of buses, doesn't have a lot of ways. The only way that you get around in Southern California is with a car." And I said, "That's great. Where's my car?" There's no car. So education is going to be important to me. What am I going to do? So I walked out to the highway and I hitchhiked one way, 20 miles one way and 20 miles back just to get my education.
Wow.
That's my backstory.
That's quite a story. I mean, but wow. I mean, obviously you succeeded and you made it somewhere.
Well, a knight in shining armor appeared. So yeah,
I got one of those.
I can tell you got one of those. So a knight in shining armor appeared. I ended up meeting a naval officer who was cuter than all get out. I mean, he was so cute, and he paid attention to me and he asked me out for a date. So I was like, "Yeah, sure. That's great." So we drove 30 miles out to where we were to get a date. Well, at the time, I didn't realize that I had the disorder that I have now that I can now control. But at the time I could fall asleep like that. And you couldn't move me. You couldn't touch me. It was like I weighed 1,000 pounds.
Do you have narcolepsy or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it was a version of that. And, but it was caused by celiac, which I didn't know at the time. And so he came to pick me up, and my younger sister there said, "Oh, she's asleep." And he's like, "It's 5 PM. She's asleep." And she's like, "Yeah, she's asleep." And she shut the door on him.
That sounds like a sister.
Right. And so I'm pretty much a, whatever happens, happens. And so I was like, "Oh, well, something else to come along." So about a month later, I went to a different dance, and this guy came up to me. Oh my gosh, he was so good looking. And he said, "So you're going to apologize?" And I said, "For what?" Because I'm not good with faces, right? Give me some numbers. I'm pretty good. And he's like, "You stood me up." I was like, "I didn't stand you up. What are you talking about?" So he heard my story, found out what I was doing, what was going on. He was getting ready to go out to sea. And he said, "You know what? I mean, I've known this guy for like 1 week." He said, "You know what? I was just getting ready to put my car in storage. Why don't you drive it?"
Wow.
I had never met anyone so kind, so generous, so loving in my life. This next summer, we will be celebrating our 48th wedding anniversary.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Now, this is for somebody who I swore when I was 18 years old, I was never going to get married, ever. I mean, why would I get married? My parents married and divorced. My grandparents married and divorced. My great-grandparents married and divorced. Why would I do?
Exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. My mom, I believe, has had 4 or 5 marriages now. I decided to quit counting, but marriage and relationships just, they didn't last. So why would you bother?
Right.
Not to mention, one of the marriages you had modeled for you had a hitman involved.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of a deterrent, I would say. But
Yeah.
I do have a question. So, you were talking about being in high school and then, going into foster care. And then after high school, going out to be with your father. Where was your father while you were in foster care? I mean, did he know that you were in foster care? Did he try to do anything about that or?
Yeah, well, when I left home, he was still in the throes of the court case.
Okay.
And so he was trying his best to take care of his son and daughter that he had at the time, which turned out not to be his son. And but we treat him like he is. And he actually, both my parents died, leaving traces that we followed up, that each of them separately gave up a child for adoption. And what's interesting is the child my father gave up for adoption was born the same year I was born. I was born in December. So that means that my father is probably pretty active.
I mean, that's a nice way to put it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Now,
So that's the
after you left home and you were in foster care, did you
backstory.
continue to have a relationship with your mother at that point, or?
Well, Amanda, I continue to have relationships with my brother and sister that I had been raised with. Biologically, they're my half siblings, but by every other way, they're my full siblings. Biologically, I'm an only child. So I continue to have relationships with them, and I did maintain relationships with my mother. In the early 90s, I started doing therapy. I'm a voracious reader, so I was reading a lot of books, trying to understand, trying to figure out, trying to first of all just get myself balanced, right? I just needed to find my own, like, how do I make this work kind of thing. So for 4 years, once a week, I was in therapy, just to try and get myself balanced. In the meantime, I did maintain relationships with my mother. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but I think almost anybody would have diagnosed her as a narcissistic alcoholic. And I look back, and for years, really, literally until last year, I saw her exclusively as a monster, an absolute monster, and just saw all the lives that I felt like that she had destroyed. There's me, there's my sister and my brother, and the three, she kind of drugged the three of us, throughout the Midwest. But my brother, she would say to him, you're just like your father, and your father is no good. How many times do you have to hear that before you put those two sentences together?
Hey there, Foster Care Nation. If you'd like to find yourself in a group with like-minded people, head over to Facebook, and you can find us at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. We've got a group over there where we talk about foster care, we talk about adoption, and we talk about all the things related. If your podcast player allows it, you can also reach down and hit that subscribe button so you get notified every week when we put up uploads. Every Tuesday, a new episode comes out. We'd love to see you next week. Now back to the show. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Words are powerful.
Yeah. And now, as it turned out, the three of us turned out to be contributing members of society. My sister was married for almost 40 years. Her husband died of sleep apnea about 3 years ago. And my brother has been married for over 25 years. So we both, all three of us, brought a lot of stability into our own personal lives, independent of the way we were raised.
That's really rare to see, because those sorts
Right.
of problems tend to be generational.
Right.
And, at least one of the siblings come out of that, really follow the parents' lead. And it sounds like you guys all managed to find your own path to something much better.
Somehow. Now, on the other side, on my father's side, the oldest, who's the one I've never met, he's the one that was adopted. When my sister on that side went to speak with him, he heard her story and said, I'm happy where I am. Thank you very much. And kind of shut the door. Then the next one, who actually belongs to my stepmother, um, really struggles with anxiety. I mean, big time. He struggled with even being able to talk to us for a number of years, just because not anything he had against us, but him trying to work out his own issues. And then my sister, in a way, committed suicide through alcoholism at 49. Both my father and my sister died at 49. And it was pretty much alcoholism. For my father, it was probably a little bit of cigarettes, tobacco. Yeah. So.
Wow. It sounds
Yeah.
like you guys have really independently found a pathway to success. What do you think was the catalyst for you to find that pathway? What made you go search for something more?
Well, Jason, I think that what the research that I found, because I questioned that myself, and what I came up with in therapy is that the two people who probably contributed to my mother's illness, who probably contributed to her narcissism, because she was born and raised when the youngest kid was over 16 years old. So she was known as the accident, right? So she had that growing up. And because she was the youngest and everybody was off doing their thing, including my grandparents, they pretty much let her do anything she wants. So she said yes to everything. Well, you can't help but become a self-centered, right, when that happens. So the two people that kind of created or contributed to my mother's narcissistic tendencies, and I don't know, I'm thinking something traumatic may have happened either in high school or younger. I mean, but besides the fact that her husband said she had to have an abortion and she didn't want to have one, but something triggered to cause her to go off. Well, what's interesting is those two people are probably what saved me, because I spent so much time with my grandparents as an infant and even older. And I think that they kind of gave me that stability. I know, even going into their little tiny house, which gets smaller and smaller every year to me. I don't know if you've ever gone back to old houses, but it's like, how did that house get so small? I have such warm and tender memories of that. And the studies show that the first 12 months of life really can fire up those brain dendrites, right? And get them going in the right direction. They say that, you can hold an infant at 6 weeks and tell whether or not they have self-esteem. And I really think that it was my grandparents that gave me self-esteem, self-confidence, and allowed me to make a different choice in life.
It's amazing. I'd mentioned the talking with Gina Human a while back. Her story was about a kid who did not have that at a young age, and that's where, as far as they understand it, where they believe RAD really comes from. So
Yeah.
reactive attachment, I think, can actually look a lot like narcissism in later years, because it has so many wild pieces. I don't know how much of that you're familiar with, but it's one of those things that's really, it's a scary, but I almost said disease. It's not a disease, it's a disorder, because you don't catch it. You don't get it. The bacteria or virus doesn't give it to you. It's something that happens because of what someone did or did not do when you were a kid.
Right.
It sounds like you have really fond memories of your grandparents, though.
Yes, I do.
May I ask, where were your grandparents when you were in foster care?
My grandmother died when I was 10, and my grandfather, I think he may have died by then as well.
Okay.
So when you did go into foster care, what was that like? I mean, we've heard all kinds of stories, everything from wonderful, beautiful homes where people, had met these loving relationships that have lasted a lifetime, right down to violent, physical, sexually abusive homes as well. And so, did you have a good experience in foster care, or was it something else?
So, Jason, I'm very thankful for my foster family. They were there when I needed them. That's the best thing ever, right? I was the oldest. They had two children of their own, and they also, the mother was pregnant with the baby. So the baby was born while I was there. They also had a farm. So I think it was great to have me there because I got to slop the pigs and take care of the hay and do things on the farm after school. So I think that it was good all the way around, right? They were generous in the fact that I had my own bedroom, which was the first time in my life I'd had my own bedroom. So that was a big deal. It was in the basement. I was ecstatic about that. They were reasonable in terms of you know, um, they didn't withhold things from me. I all my life I've kind of felt like I'm separate or kind of a satellite from others, um, and so it was consistent there. Mhm.
Well, it almost makes me wonder if being around the farm, the exposure to animals wasn't something that was also helpful. We've talked with a lot of different people about doing therapy, a lot of equine therapies and things like that with kids who have their own backstory of trauma, because it's a it's a prey animal, and they identify a lot of times really well with kids who feel like prey animals.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I'm not fond of animals, so.
I'm not a big animal person either, but I mean,
And those sows were big, and you
Yeah.
didn't mess with them. So I was up against the fence a lot.
oh, and they're smelly too.
They're smelly, and the cows weren't any friendlier. And a horse. So, yeah, it wasn't something I got real excited about. Although after I in between before I got to foster care, while I was still trying to figure out what to do, I did pick corn for a while, and that was interesting. They pick you up at like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and you go out in the field, right? And you pick corn. So I had I'm not afraid to take different jobs. I'm not afraid to take different jobs.
it sounds like you've done just about all of them. But as a young man, I did work for a couple farmers,
Yeah.
and I have fed the hogs, and I will go ahead and verify those sows are big and they're mean, and
They're mean.
They no fun, and be around. The horses typically aren't so bad, but
It's hard work being on a farm.
Those horses have big teeth and big. I mean, they're big.
Well, and if you've never been around that before, it can be very intimidating.
Yeah, not my field. I'm glad it helps others.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to a few different people about equine therapy, and talking with people about maybe dog support therapy and things like that. For a lot of kids, animals can be comforting.
Yes.
They can confide into that animal, and it goes nowhere.
Yeah,
they're not telling the kid at school, and then everybody knows your business, and you're being made fun of, and everything like that.
Yeah, we talked quite a bit with Rebecca Britt about doing the equine therapy and how that's helped a lot of kids over the years. And obviously not every kid's going to benefit from it the same way because, well, not every kid really wants to hang out with the animals.
That would be me.
I wouldn't have wanted to either when I was a young girl. We did have a small kind of little, I don't know, I guess you would call it like a hobby farm when a couple of our kids were younger. But yeah, as a young teenage girl, yeah, I wouldn't want to be feeding the pigs.
Yeah.
I will say though, it looks like you've done okay for yourself from slopping the hogs to an office with a Ph.D. hanging on the wall. I'm just gonna say that sounds like quite the success story. And I think that's part of what I really wanted the listeners to hear is you came from a really tough place in a really small town in the middle of nowhere back in times when that was a really determining factor on who you would become. And when you did that, that was, man, you had the deck stacked against you.
Yeah.
And you've managed to walk that road all the way out to being a college professor, a public speaker, a TED talker. This is not the background of your typical kid who's going through this.
Yeah. And I wonder myself, Jason, okay, so I'm gonna get a little spiritual on you here. I do believe that there were a lot of angels that were guiding me throughout, keeping me safe and different things. I look back at some of the situations. I mean, I was 18-year-old naive girl from Nebraska on the sides of the San Diego freeway hitchhiking.
Yeah, I mean that's dangerous. I mean there was a time where women who were hitchhiking were not
disappeared. Yeah. Yeah, more than once, the California Highway Patrol would pick me up and say, "What are you doing out here?" I'd say, "Oh, I'm hitchhiking to get to school." And they go, "Get in," and they would take me. And there were a couple times where I was in the back of a van and I was kind of looking around and going, "Huh, I probably shouldn't have gotten in on this thing." you know?
Yeah. Wow.
But
Yeah.
I think the part that is so very important to see is that regardless of where you come from, with enough grit, with enough of the right choices, you will take yourself to the right place.
And I do think, Jason, that a lot of it is the help along the way, right? I mean, I didn't do this by myself. I had lots of people helping. I mean, my dad offered to pay for my college education if I came out to California. Now, I will, this is kind of funny. So I hitchhiked to get to school, right? It was a community college in California in the 70s. The tuition for as many courses as you wanted to take at a community college in California in the 70s was $2. And
Wow.
that paid for your health insurance. But my dad paid it and it was great. So so I was able to take advantage of a lot of situations. So so a lot of it is I just kept wanting to. I knew what I wanted. I wanted a different life. I knew. And when I was 18, I wrote down that there were 5 goals I was going to have. I heard one time that if you write down your goals and you're very specific, that you have a much better chance of accomplishing them. And so I wrote down my 5 goals. My number 1 goal was I was going to earn my Ph.D. And I didn't know what a Ph.D. was, and I didn't know what subject it was going to be in. I just heard that was the highest degree you could get, and I was going to get it. And my number 2 goal was I was going to buy a house. That makes sense, right? I was going to have someplace stable to live. And I remember writing in parentheses, I didn't care if I had furniture or not. I mean, I would sleep on the floor. I just was going to buy a house. My number 3 goal was I was going to buy a car and it was going to be paid for. My entire life, I lived on layaway. That was, I wasn't taught how to save money. And so instead of saving money, I remember I got invited my senior year. I was living in a foster home and I got invited to the prom, and I didn't have any money for a prom dress. I didn't know what to do. So I called my dad, called him collect, and said, I bought some material on layaway, right, from Woolworths or something, and a pattern, but I don't have enough money to get it out. Would you send me the $18 or whatever it was to get it out? And he sent that to me. Everything I did, that was the only financial education I had. So yeah, I forgot where I was going with all this.
Your 5 goals.
My 5 goals. Okay, so it was going to have a car and it was going to be paid for. Number 4, I can't remember what it was because it was distant, but I know it had nothing to do with anything because number 5, my 5th goal. So out of all of those, my 5th goal was I was going to start serious dating. At 18, I said, by the time I'm 25, at 25, I'm going to start serious dating. Real life on this hand was I didn't have my PhD, but I was working on my master's. So that I gave myself credit for that. I didn't buy a house, but I had figured out that if you were a manager at an apartment complex, you got your place for free. So I was like, okay, that works. I did have a car and it was completely paid for. And I'll tell you how in a minute. Remember, I didn't remember number 4. And the 5th one, by the time I was 25, remember I was going to start serious dating. By the time I was 25, I've been married to my knight in shining armor for 5 years and pregnant with my first. Do you remember hearing me saying anything at all about having children, starting a family? No. In fact, when I was 18, I went to my gynecologist and I said, yeah, I want a hysterectomy right now because I'm not going to have any children. And they wisely said, no, we don't give 18-year-olds hysterectomy just because they ask for it. So how did I buy my car? Well, I bought my car to satisfy my husband's greatest wish. For 2 years, he kept saying, will you marry me? I said, no. Will you marry me? No. Will you marry me? No. And then finally, he figured out my value system. And he said, do you know that if we get married, the Navy pays us an extra $155 a month? I said, let's go to Vegas. So that weekend we went to Vegas, and
Financial move.
Yes. So I was so upset because on Monday I said, did you go and get it changed? He said, yeah, they didn't ask for the marriage license. I'm like, you're kidding me. I didn't have to go through this. And I told him I would get married on one condition, which he agreed to. I said, the only reason we're getting married is for the $155 a month. And he said, okay. I said, so when you get out of the Navy, there's no more $155 a month, right? And he said, yes. I said, so when you get out of the Navy, we get a divorce. And he said, okay. He never served more than 2 years in the Navy.
I think you forgot part of that deal, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I got busy, and
Life, it happens.
It could happen.
Yeah, I think you've bought in. You're a little too far now to go back and redeem that certificate for divorce.
He's almost trained. I am not giving this up.
Don't give her any hope that she's going to get me trained.
It's only 47 years, Amanda. Just stick with it.
I mean, we've got 20 years in, so I'm halfway there.
There you go.
I wouldn't change it for the world. So.
I was just never a very good student, so
Oh.
It might take a little more than that for me. Oh my goodness. So, well, I love your goal of getting a PhD in 5 years. I'm not certain that one's terribly realistic.
Not at all.
But you got it, and you're in this amazing world, and you're working where you're helping people and helping kids, and came out of such poverty and distress and trouble, and moving into a world where you can make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're talking about here on your TED Talk and the things you're doing, helping people with anxiety. We're in a world now where it's either different or people are just talking about it more. Anxiety never came up much when I was a kid. I didn't hear people talking about that. Today, I don't know many people who don't say they're suffering from anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Panic attacks, anxiety attacks. It's everywhere. People are struggling with it because life is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, that's just more of a thing now. People know about it. They're maybe talking about what was going on for all those years. Mm-hmm. So as you're helping, you're looking at that, and you're helping people. Back to the acronym, whose name I'm probably going to mess up. Yeah, I'll let you say it because
dissolving waffles, worries, anxiety, fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress.
I mean, we all have some waffles. I'm pretty sure I got a few boxes.
Yeah, we've got cases of those in the freezer. We got like Costco cases full of those sorts of waffles, I think. Because we've done foster care, we've adopted some kids out of the system who have lots of those same things, and even as young kids they have them, and they don't know it. They don't have the language to put around it.
Right.
But I see anxiety in my 5-year-old. I've watched it since he was born. He was born addicted, and so he's got his fair share of struggles, and we'll work our way through that. But to be fair, I know you said you weren't a psychologist. I claim to be. But I'm a completely uneducated, untrained, uncertified, unpaid psychologist. It's a hobby of mine, right? I find it interesting. I play with the ideas because I think it's really interesting. And hopefully some of the things I can figure out will help these kids. But I don't have a whole lot of real hard facts to help them with a lot of times. So the work you're doing, are you working with specifically adults? Is this stuff that works with kids as well?
Well, Jason, I think I mentioned I have the team Adorables. I call them my legal granddaughters because the first letter of their name spell out the word legal. So I got to say that. So my legal granddaughters, they are team Adorables. And they range in age from 6 months to 7. And I have used this technique on every one of them. When the oldest was about 2 or so, she was petrified of loud noises, absolutely petrified of loud noises, so much that we had to take her out of the house to vacuum. And then trying to potty train her, and she has to go to the bathroom in a restaurant where you flush a toilet and the sound reverberates throughout the whole place. It was like what do you call it when you have the it was like a brigade, that's what it was, where we would hand her off to different people so we could get her out the door so we could flush the toilet, because the sound would just be disruptive. So I tapped with her, of course, with her parents' permission, to help her overcome the fear of loud noises. She was in my house today and the blender was going on, and she's like, "Oh, that's a loud noise, isn't it?" And she no longer has that fear.
Wow.
The exciting thing about tapping is that the studies have shown, they've compared tapping to cognitive behavior therapy, which is talk therapy,
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, I think, response, and then EFT, which is tapping. And what they found is out of those, EMDR and EFT can erase those emotions. I mean, they're gone. They're absolutely gone. But between EMDR and EFT, EMDR, you have to be sitting in front of a therapist because you may go into a trauma response. And so you have to have a therapist with you all throughout the whole thing. The beauty about EFT is that you can do it yourself. There's a school in Pacific Grove, California, where they've been doing tapping. They do tapping 6 minutes a day, every day. And it's the students, the faculty, the staff, everybody does. They have a 6-minute tapping session where they just tap on the different parts of their body, and they just do the tapping. And what they found is that after doing this, that the test scores went up, that the behavior issues went down, and that the special needs kids were assimilating better. So it is something that has been popular throughout the rest of the world, much more so than it is in America, which is why I love doing these podcasts to spread the information about it. And you can do it yourself. You can get usually faster results working with someone who's been trained as an advanced certified practitioner. I've had training in level 1, level 2, level 3, trauma, and quantum. I've done some past life regression stuff, which has been very interesting. And I'm currently in training to become a trainer, so I can train others in this technique. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing technique that is easy to learn and crazy effective.
It sounds like it, because it's funny you mentioned the bathroom thing. We've had our own struggles, right? We've had lots of kids. And in today's world, when you take a little kid to the bathroom who you're trying to potty train and they move on the toilet, and then the automatic flusher takes over, right?
Yeah.
And and then mid movement, they try and go over the wall because
the sound.
I know. The person beside them is done and it goes off. It can be
traumatic for them. Yeah.
Especially for, a lot of these kids that we've had come to our house have had some level of trauma, and some of them have had a pretty high level of trauma. We've seen everything from maybe a loss of a first family sort of thing, a parent who either left or was is deceased and they lost them that way, all the way up to kids who have witnessed murders and and been drug exposed. So we've had some pretty wide ranging experience here, but these kids have dealt with a lot of trauma, and any trigger that actually hits that trauma button in their head, oh my goodness. It's not like they're going 0 to 60. It's not a linear thing. It's like they go from 0 to about somewhere around 1.5 million, and you go, huh?
What happened here?
And we've learned to realize that we're seeing trauma responses a lot of times. But it's not always clear how to help them, especially in that moment. Is this something you can use in the moment?
Well, yes, you can use it in the moment. However, I would caution to use beforehand. The person who developed this is a Stanford educated electrical engineer by the name of Gary Craig. And what he did is he watched what psychologists and psychiatrists were doing with traditional Chinese medicine, meridians. And he saw the meridians as if they were electrical circuits. And he identified these few spots that hits like 98% of the meridians. He has taken this into the Veterans Hospital and worked with Vietnam vets who have been hospitalized and drugged for over 40 years. And in 1 week of tapping with them, they are drug-free, and free to go back into society. So yeah, they use it with PTSD a lot.
Wow, that's amazing.
That
It
is
is.
amazing. One other quick question: does it make teenagers like kind kids?
It does. It does help teenagers manage things, because teenagers are, they're trying to figure out the rules and make their own rules. And our jobs is to maintain the boundaries, and their jobs is to test the boundaries. And it's really hard to keep maintaining those boundaries. Can I go to Waterworld? No. Can I go to Waterworld? No. Can I go to Waterworld? No. Can I go, and they, in the words of Bart Simpson, and they feel like it's kind of like, a slot machine. We're just going to keep trying. Now, if the response is the same all the time, that's good. But that one time they hit it and we have had the day and we are out of it and we say, yes, that they're like, okay, it worked one time. And then they move forward. Then they go full force.
Oh yeah. Let's not just stand at that fence. Let's knock it over.
So the idea is to tap on ourselves so that we have the strength to be able to withstand all of their testing. And that's where the real strength comes.
I'm one of those few fortunate people who's pretty good at holding those boundaries. Once I build them, I tend to put up high voltage electric fences around them. And
me too.
And I had well, she's 13. I almost called her my little girl.
She's still your little girl.
Yeah, she doesn't appreciate the terminology, but especially as a little girl, when she was she just a beautiful little girl, had this amazing ability to look at you and turn her head to the side, and she'd fill the entire inside of her eye with this massive tear. And she'd say, "Daddy, please." And at that moment, she'd blink just right, so the tear would roll down her cheek. She would look so adorable. And everybody around me would melt, and I would look at her and say, "No." I'm fortunate. Yeah. I'm that guy who still has that ability, but most people don't. So how does this work for, I mean, I'm not going to say I've got it all figured out. That part I had figured out. The rest of it, I'm certain I still need plenty of help too. So how does that work for us when we're working with ourselves, or maybe even working with young kids?
So I'm the same way as you are, Jason. I was the disciplinarian in the family. And my husband apparently has only one word that he can say, and that's yes, of course. And then I get to clean it up. But yeah, no, you can use tapping to help yourself. And that can make all the difference in the world. And you can teach it to your teenagers. I have clients literally all over the world that I work with teenagers to help them overcome their math and test anxiety. That's ostensibly what they come to me for. And in the process of doing that, I find out that, it's really not about the math and test anxiety. It's the way my friend is teaching me or treating me. It's the fact that I'm concerned about my sexuality. It's I'm not really getting along with my parents. It's this, it's that. I feel so much pressure to have to know what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. And so it's never about the math and it's never about the test anxiety. It's always about something else.
Yeah. It's never about the thing that we think it is. It's always easier to transfer that over somewhere else. So how do, maybe a crash course, how do we begin to implement some of that?
Okay. Well, which one of you want to be my volunteer?
I'm going to let him.
You have to. I have to turn knobs and buttons over here.
You're up.
All right. I guess I'm up, she says.
Okay. Amanda, you're a chicken. That's okay. We love chicken, so that's okay. So Jason, tell me something recently that you found fearful or frustrating or caused you a little bit of stress.
Oh, frustrating. I have teenagers. I have 3 teenagers in the house, and some of them may enjoy pushing my buttons on a regular basis, almost like they know where they're at and they know which ones are the most entertaining to watch.
So tell me the most recent time when one of the teenagers pushed one of your buttons.
Most recently. He probably wouldn't appreciate me telling the story, but that's okay. He never listens.
That's okay. You don't. Here's the thing about tapping. You don't even have to say it. You can just say the issue that happened on that day.
Yeah, that issue, because I'm horrible and I'm stupid, and he hates me, and it's a horrible place, and he wished he was never here, and fill in all the blanks. It's teenager talk, right? It's
Okay.
You're
what
not
every
my
teen
real
has
dad.
said.
You're not my real mom.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And when did that happen?
very recently. I couple, what, 3 or 4 days ago, maybe at the
3 or
most.
4 days ago. Okay. Okay. And when you think about 3 or 4 days ago, when you got all that information about that issue, what emotion do you feel?
Hmm. I'm a fairly unemotional person, but I'm very,
Mhm.
very well connected to the anger emotion.
Anger. Okay. And from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, when you think about that issue that happened 3 or 4 days ago, and think about that anger, where is it in your body?
It's in my chest.
In your chest. And when you think about that anger that's in your chest, what color is the anger?
Ironically, most people see anger as red, but it's definitely blue for some reason.
Blue. Sure, of course it's blue. And when I'm going to ask you to repeat some words. First, we're going to do it without words, and then we're going to do it with words. And
Okay.
when we do the with words, if I say something and you go, you know what, that's not really true for me, or I would have said it differently. Will you restate it in your own words?
Sure.
Okay, great. And is this a true statement for you? Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Yes.
Okay. And from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal, it's just kids talking, and 10 is the most anger you've ever felt in your life. When you think about 3 or 4 days ago and that anger in your chest, that blue anger in your chest, what number is it intensity from 0 to 10?
I'm pretty used to it, so I'd say it's probably about a 7 at this point.
A 7. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the tapping points without words, and I'm going to describe the places in case somebody's listening to this and doesn't have the video. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to start on the side of the hand between your little finger and your wrist, and you can use either hand. And with the other hand, you're going to tap right there. So what I have is my right hand is tapping on the left hand side. So my left is tapping right where my fingers and my wrist are. So you got that?
Yep.
And Amanda, you can tap along with him, and it would be good. And you might actually have something called borrowing benefits. So you may feel an energy shift yourself.
You mean chicken benefits?
Yeah, I'm sorry. And so, Jason, when we have the sentences that we're going to say the sentence 3 times while we're tapping on this spot. Okay. Okay. Next spot we're going to tap, and we're going to use either a right hand or a left hand or both, is on the top of our head. And we can use one or the other, or we can do my monkey move and tap on the top of the head. Our next spot is going to be right above our nose on the edge of our eyebrow. So it's going to be right here. And again, you can use one hand or the other or both. And you tap right there. And you can breathe while you're doing that, because breathing is, really a good idea. And then on the side of the eye, between the eye and the hairline, on both sides, either one side or the other or both, it doesn't matter. I took my glasses off so that you could see better. And then the next spot is under the eye. That's where I store all my bags, right there. And then under the nose, above the lips, right above the lips. And you can breathe. Oh, feels so good. And then under the lips, above the chin. And then cross your wrists, and so that you're tapping on your collarbones, both sides. If you want to use one hand, you can stretch out the hand so that the thumb's on one side and the other fingers on the other. And then the last spot is about 4 inches under our arms, right on our rib cage. And you can do one hand or the other, or you can give yourself a hug if you want to. That always feels good. And then at the end, I always ask everyone to blow out the air in a cartoonish fashion. So we go.
All right, your turn to do the cartoonist noise.
I'm just along for the ride here.
Oh, man.
Okay. Okay, so you ready? We'll add words now.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to start tapping on the side of the hand and say, even though.
Even though.
When I think about that issue 3 or 4 days ago.
When I think about the issue 3 or 4 days ago.
and all the things he said.
and all the things he said.
I feel this blue anger in my chest, right?
I feel this blue anger in my chest.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Even though this blue anger is in my chest.
This blue anger is in my chest.
When I think about that issue 3 or 4 days ago, and he said all those mean things. Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Even though I can still remember all the things he said 3 or 4 days ago. And it gives me so much blue anger in my chest. Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
And then top of the head, this blue anger in my chest. And on the edge of the eyebrow, right above the nose, this blue anger in my chest. And then on the side of the eye, between the eye and the hairline, this blue anger in my chest. And then under the eye, this blue anger in my chest. Under the nose, this blue anger is in my chest. And then under the lips, there's about a level 7 in my chest. And then across your arms and your collarbone, this blue anger in my chest. And then about 4 inches down, all this blue anger in my chest. Okay, you ready for the cartoon part?
Yep.
So how's it feel?
Right now, I'm still fairly peaceful.
How do you feel? What does it feel like in your chest?
Right now, I don't really have anything going on in my chest.
Okay. And when you think about that from 0 to 7, when you think about that issue, the anger, where would it be now?
Oh, I don't really feel it at all right now, even when I think about it.
So what happens is we have a limiting belief, and the limiting belief may be that, I don't know, a couple of them are all teenagers are supposed to rebel, or the boys are supposed to be difficult, or, whatever limiting belief we have. And just like when you get a different car and you look around and like all the cars around you are the same car as yours, right? Does that ever happen?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So when we have our limiting belief, anything that happens that we can use to support that limiting belief, we hold on to. And then what happens is if we can get this one limiting belief, this one aspect, if we can erase it so that it no longer has emotional pull, and then we get another one and it release that so it no longer has an emotional pull, and eventually that limiting belief goes away.
I don't have any limiting beliefs.
I know you don't. I was talking about the rest of the world, Jason.
Oh,
People
dear.
like me.
I've worked through all that already.
I know, right?
Right?
Oh, honey, you have plenty of waffles.
There was a couple of things my therapist told me, and I had a great therapist. I mean, I wouldn't have stayed with him for 4 years if I didn't. But there was a couple of things that happened. One is that at the end, when he and I both decided that we'd pretty much gone as far as we could and that I had attained the balance that I needed, he said, "Now, I just want to warn you, things may come up in the future. We're going to trigger some of the same responses." And I was like, "What? You mean, I thought we were done with all of this?" And he was right. There were situations that came up that triggered, man, I had that same response right all over again. The other thing I noticed is that he was a very good therapist and he was a great business person. So I would come in the middle of my workday, pour my heart out, be in absolute tears, shattered, a mess. And he'd say, "Oh, Katie, it's been 60 minutes. We're done now." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. And I would stumble my way out of his office, go to the car, try to regroup and go back into work. the beauty about tapping is that at the end of every 60-minute session that I have, I bring the client back to a state of peace, so that you don't take that with you. You don't take that with you. And the studies have shown that when you work on something and it goes away, it does not come back. The trigger's gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredibly beneficial because, like I mentioned, we've got deep trauma that hangs out in our house.
I'm sure.
And so figuring out, I mean, even if we could help a little bit, that would be amazing.
Sure.
Well, and it sounds like, in doing the tapping that it's like self-regulating.
Yes, it
and
is.
that can be so hard in the moment.
Yes.
I mean, even as an adult, there's times where I don't keep my cool and I should, so self-regulation is a big, big thing.
I never have that problem.
I know. Well, we're just talking between Amanda and I. That's all.
If anybody could see my eye roll, that would be great.
She may have pulled a muscle there doing
I
it.
may have.
Yeah, that's something that we all struggle pretty deeply with. We bring our own traumas to the world, and then we try to parent kids who have trauma, because I don't care who your kid is. There's some trauma triggers in every kid's life.
I had no idea my 3 kids had horrible childhoods. And the things they told me, I was like, what? Let me tell you what a horrible childhood is like.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think doing foster care has really, really opened my eyes to. Is I had a reasonably good childhood. My mom, spanked me a few times when I don't think I deserved it, but there was probably a couple times she missed when I did deserve it. I didn't have that bad of a childhood, right? It was pretty good growing up. And then we see these kids who've been through so much and look back and go, okay, man, I was kind of complaining about some of the stuff I grew up with. And right about now, I'm feeling like I need to shut my mouth, because it wasn't that bad.
Well, and you've also dealt with a lot of my traumas coming to surface over the years.
Sure. Yeah.
But you throw all that into a house, and then we have to learn how to regulate those for the kids and, ourselves for their benefit, help them to learn because they're going to hopefully someday grow up, live a life, maybe even have kids of their own. They're going to have to deal with their own traumas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the earlier we can help them figure out how to start that process.
Yeah.
I mean, the better off I think they will be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you did mention you have clients all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
How would somebody find you to become a client?
So a parent in Switzerland saw my TEDx talk and then Googled me and found me through my website. My website is a play on words because, I never do anything easy. So it's my last name, Nall, Nall, followed by the word edge, EDGE, and then company, co.com. So it's knowledgecompany.com. And so it's www.nalledgeco.com. They can also email me by hello@drnall.com. That's HELLO@DRNALL.com. And I will throw out a challenge for your listeners. I give my phone number on every podcast and nobody calls me. So maybe your listeners will call me. My phone number is area code 772-480-0541. If I can't pick up, leave your name and number and I'll return it.
Awesome.
Wonderful. You mentioned to Jason and I that you do some mastermind classes. What does that look like?
So a friend approached me in the middle of last year and said, hey, I have these 40 days of journal prompts for prosperity. You want to try them? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm good for something, and she is a solopreneur. I'm an employee. She is a devout atheist. I am spiritual. And we went through these 40-day prompts where we journaled every day. We touch base with each other every day. Hey, how'd you do? Did you get them done or not? I, being who I am, started on day 1, did all the way through day 40. My friend started on day 1 and life got in the way about day 5 or 6 and she wasn't able to keep going. So the way this works is you go back to day 1 and you start over again. So she would go and then go back. I don't think she ever got past day 15. But
Sounds like me.
let me tell you the results. In 40 days, she doubled her sustainable monthly income. Now, I can't double my sustainable monthly income because I'm an employee. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen to me? Well, I started paying attention, and in those 40 days, $10,000 came to me unsolicited. Now, for you guys, that may not sound like a lot of money, but for me, it was huge, especially for me not having to do really anything. We had had a car accident about 3 years ago, and everything had settled over a year ago. And out of the blue, this other check came from the attorneys. And they're like, oh, this is the residual part. And we're like, residual part? We signed everything. Why are we getting, my mortgage broker called me up and said, the interest rates are so low now. Let's see what we can do. They saved me $500 a month. And I was like, whoa. So I started this mastermind because I talked to other friends who had done these journal prompts before and nothing had happened. So I was trying to figure out what was different about ours. Well, we did the journal prompts every day. We checked in with each other. So it was that accountability piece, but we also tapped. And we tapped away our money blocks. And it was in tapping. I think the tapping was the magical circus, right? It was a piece that kind of held it all together. So this is about the fourth session that I've had, the mastermind. And it consists of daily prompts that are sent to the participants once a day. And then every week they get assigned a new accountability partner. Now, these accountability partners end up either becoming clients or becoming somebody that you would buy things from, or they become good friends. And then twice a week we meet on Zoom and we tap. We tap about our wins. We tap about our challenges. We tap about what's going on in life. So we have a new mastermind starting about every 40 days.
Wow. Yeah. And, a lot of people may not be terribly familiar with the masterminds and how they work in general. I'm mentioned on a regular basis on this podcast that I'm a member of a dad's group online. And it all started, I was actually in a mastermind with the founder, Larry Hagner, who had a podcast and a Facebook group around being dad. It was all dad centric stuff. And as I was in the mastermind is where the mastermind group started. And I've been a member of that for the last 4 years.
Good for you.
The differences I've seen in my life have been phenomenal. And honestly, I can attribute most of it to the fact that for the last 4.5 years now, on a weekly basis, I'm meeting with guys who are dad-centric people, who are focused on what it means to be not only a dad, but a good dad, who are focused on what it means to be a good husband, who are looking at improving their lives, cleaning up their world in some places where they see it, being around men who will hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. Because if I do some silly stuff, let me tell you, we've got guys in this group from Australia and in the UK and all over the world. But the guy who runs the group, who started it all, he's about 20 miles down the road. And if he felt a need, he might come over and thump me to get my attention. We've actually got a pretty big contingent of guys in the St. Louis area close to where I live. And so just having that group of people around me to, even if it's just through Zoom, hold me accountable and talk about the things that matter to us, that really matter to us. Yeah. And that's been really beneficial for me. So, having a group of people in whatever way it is that you need to turn your life, that was something I needed. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I had first joined that group was right around the time that I had decided that, after we lost our daughter, I went to a pretty dark space for a while. And without going through all the different parts and pieces, just know that whiskey became more than a friend for me. And it was, I only had one drink a night. It was usually about a 700 milliliter drink, and it was shaped just like a bottle. And I did that for quite a while. And it took me a long time to find the right group of people to convince me that the best thing for me, for my wife, for my kids was to turn my life around and do some different things. And it's amazing, as you mentioned it, the just the financial side. Oh, yeah. Once I got myself dried out and stopped drinking at all, suddenly this opportunity came up where the house that my wife had been wanted to live for the last 10 years. We've been driving past this house, beautiful old Victorian style house. It was built back at somewhere around 1900 something. And she loved this house, and it went up for sale as we were looking at houses. And well, that's where we're sitting today.
Aw.
All these things happened, and I was still paying for the other place, the old place that we were living in before, trying to sell it. And somehow or another, I was still able to pay for 2 mortgages.
Yeah.
And my income did not go up.
Right.
But being around the right people made a lot of differences in a lot of ways.
And Jason, the studies have shown too that that sense of community, that sense of people that are hold you accountable, the people that will drift in unannounced, like you said, and thump you up the side of the head, that's really the one and only key to longevity. It's not diet, it's not exercise, it's not wealth, it is community. And that's what masterminds can really give you. So I'm so glad to hear that you've got a mastermind that works for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. I've been really fortunate to find one that was really, really focused around one of the core things in my life. I've got 7 kids.
Yeah.
One of my core defining things is I'm a dad.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, no, I really do appreciate you telling us all about your program and your mastermind, and giving people the website again, which is iloveknowledge.com. Nall Edge. Yes, that's great. Dad
jokes
are real, right? I'm all about the pun, and Amanda had to go chase some kids, otherwise she'd be rolling her eyes at me again.
Do you want me to do an eye roll for you? I'm practiced too.
I feel like she knows me well enough. She just rolled her eyes to the back of her head and doesn't know why. But no, so I really do appreciate you coming in here and telling your story today. You have a really wild and interesting story. And it's one of those, I mentioned it before, where you come from somewhere really difficult and you have walked your way to success.
Yeah, with a lot of help.
Exactly. And, learning to appreciate that help is a big thing. But I think we all have to realize that we have that in us somewhere.
And that help is there waiting for us. All we have to do is ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think we all struggle with, asking for help. I don't want to be a burden.
So I have this thing I say to people who don't want to ask for help. There's a phrase that a lot of people have heard that it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. So if you're giving all the time, who gets the blessings? You do. When you ask for help, you're giving others the opportunity to be blessed. So give them the opportunity to be blessed and ask for help.
I will agree with you 100%. I know that some of the best moments of my life has been when I've been able to reach out and through just some small act of kindness, help someone else. And the feeling I get from that, the experience I get from that is such a blessing to me. And when I refuse to ask for help from someone else, I'm keeping them from that.
Yes, you're being what I call a blessings hog. We talked about pigs a lot.
Yes. And I still don't like them unless it's bacon shaped.
Yeah.
I don't like hogs at all until they get to the plate.
Yeah, there you go.
So, well, it's great talking to you today. I appreciate your time this evening, talking with Amanda and I. I really do think that our listeners can take a lot from this story and understand that their life has not been defined by their past. Right. They have a whole future ahead of them that they still get to define.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jason. And please give my appreciation to Amanda. I know she's busy with the kids. And I love what you're doing. And I appreciate all that you're doing for others. Thank you.
Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Katie's story. Now take her knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and your community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes of every Tuesday. If you would like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at fostercareuj@gmail.com, or from our website, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have a Patreon where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything in the show notes on your podcast player or over at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys are go. Yeah. Thank you for listening.